I feel like I've had another little kind of learning experience, and I totally agree with someone. One of the things that came into my YouTube feed, that some guy said, he just said, we don't, this idea that we've got to be in constant growth it's just wrong. Like, you don't need to constantly grow. And I don't know exactly what he means, but I think we all got a handle on that, how growth mindset, like you've just got to get to a point where you can appreciate what you have. And I don't mean be grateful, I just mean, sorry, that's not what he meant. He didn't mean be grateful by appreciate, he just meant like live with the things that you've got and enjoy them and enjoy your life rather than constantly striving. And I do like that, really, because as a person who has striven so much to get pretty much nowhere except backwards. I know it's not a personal failing. One of the things that I was doing before I got interrupted by this chain link, this nightmare, it started in about November 21. It's funny because it sort of started around the time that I was really determined to really do. God, I picked up so much cheesy fucking lingo. I hate it, but unfortunately the things I've been through makes me understand it now, and I don't see it as a bleeding heart sort of thing. I see it as like actually kind of language that's quite suitable to the circumstances. Yeah, so I wanted to do some work on myself, and that was like I just identified a problem in myself, and it was that I just it's just really hard on people. And I just get so irritated with people, which I don't think there's going to be all that much I can do about that. I can be understanding and compassionate from afar, but interpersonally interacting in real time, it's too much for me, really. And so I think, a kind of life of pretty much of solitude is probably realistic for me. But yeah, like I was just really mean to my mum all the time. Like I was just picking on everything that she did, and that doesn't make what she's done to me my fault. And I did read this article, really interesting sociological article about women who are like me, who are distressed about the way that they treat their mothers. But, there's always a deeper, the stuff that, I hate all this, like, I don't like how counselling always has to go back to your bloody childhood, but obviously your relation, because it's often got nothing to do. I had a counsellor who, I had a really traumatic experience with a person I trusted to be compassionate a few years ago, and I didn't get compassion when I really needed it. I got hostility, and it was fucking devastating, like really fucking devastating. And it was a real trauma that ended up just sparking this, just lit the thread on this fucking TNT, and I ended up with these horrific phobias. And and the thing that I remember most about it was just the look on her face, when I was absolutely like I needed to see some compassion, and there was just hostility and coldness. And my counsellor at the time said, okay, so was there a time in your childhood where someone had looked at you like that? I'm like, what? No, it just happened to me in the worst circumstances possible when I was having a fucking, panic attack. Like, um, it's like not everything. It's like can anyone? I just really need counsellors to understand that not all traumas are just sort of echo. Not all current problems are echoes of traumas that occurred to us when we were children. Like, I can imagine like you're talking to someone whose husband died in the, Twin Towers attack, and her saying, "Did someone die in a Twin Towers attack when you were a child?" No, it just happened. Fuck, man. But obviously, when you have problems with your parents, obviously that's got roots in your childhood, right? And it quite often happens in how you're treated in that first bonding phase. And then I'm not quite sure what psychiatrists agree is the formative phase now. It used to be that it was up till 4 years old, and now I think it's changed. But whatever, something gets hardwired in. But also things can get kind of, you can get complex PTSD from things that happen later in your childhood and all through it, and your teenage years and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, reading that article had made me, and it was like an academic article, and I don't have blind trust in academic articles because I've got an academic degree, and one half of it was bullshit mostly. I did a double degree. The other one was good. The other one was really pushing against that kind of academic bullshit. Where it tries to, it purports to be doing science, but isn't. It takes qualitative data and then turns it into quantitative data it's just like, changing the extension, the file extension, and I'm just going to type in PDF. But nonetheless, it was an area that had been studied, and so even qualitatively it was very interesting. I mean, the quantitative part of it had really nothing to do with anything. If it even, I don't think it even was a quantitative sort of thing. It could kind of confuse cause and effect, but it was really interesting. I'd never seen a study that actually, because I mean, I really did, I was quite frank with myself, and I'm saying I'm abusive. I'm abusive to my mother. And I'd be abusive in a very straightforward sort of way, which is, constantly criticising, constantly pulling her up. And I also realised that I was creating a kind of, I suppose it could be a kind of trauma bond after reading an excellent article by a writer called Manj Bara, who writes on relationships, but he's like got a really amazing way to explain. I think, I don't think he's opposed to romantic relationships, but a bit like Matthew Hussey, he's he cautions his audience to not confuse other things for love. And the reason that people get infatuated with other people is often because their other person is going hot and cold. And there is a very simple and very incredibly powerful mechanism behind the hot and cold thing. And all it is it's manipulating your dopamine, and it's just basically like a, it's just like sort of like gambling. Like, people will stop gambling if they don't occasionally win. It's just when they occasionally win that will keep them going because partly it's like they think it's possible, and partly, or at least likely, and partly because they want to recoup their losses, or, you know, they've got that kind of sunk costs fallacy going on where they think of the dead effort or money they've poured in as a kind of investment or something, where it's just not, it's just a dead loss. And the thing is, when you're, like, men and women do this to each other deliberately. I'm not saying all men and all women, but, you know, I know some people. I know a guy who did it, and when I realised what he was doing, I was just like, oh, that explains why I never fucking knew what I liked about him. I can't even fucking think of anything I like about him. Like, why am I so obsessed with him? And when I realised this, and I was like, oh, that really broke the spell. It was really helpful to know all he's doing is he's just manipulating my dopamine. So my reward system is constantly striving for this attention before he goes, you know, gives me the silent treatment again, which is just classic, like, narcissist sociopath behaviour. Trauma bond, that's what it is, basically. Because it just keeps you hoping and guessing and thinking about them and wondering and putting so much effort in, and it's it's a horrible trick, but it's very, very effective. And I realised, oh no, I'm doing that to my mum, because I wouldn't be doing it to manipulate her, but I would be doing it. I would be like, my natural state would just be to be critical all the time, and then I'd be like, I can't do this, I can't, I've got to be nice, and so then I'd be nice, and it really, you know, if someone else was like observing the situation just from those interactions, not seeing any background or any other context, I probably think that I was being really manipulative. Yeah, so it sort of happens to, it turns out that there's a phenomenon where it happens to, I don't know how many middle-aged women, but who exactly the same thing. They have a lot of guilt about how they treat their mothers. But it stems from childhood abuse, and the way you relate to your mother has, you know, it's probably dysfunctional, but it's certainly, it's the mind or whatever trying to fix some sort of problem in some sort of way. And so when I was, just as my fucking, the ongoing avalanche hit me, that was when I was just starting to really, like, improve myself. And that got totally stymied, and it's like, yes, I haven't had a chance, because doing work on yourself to be a better person, like, it's really hard work, and it takes a lot of focus, and it, you know, a lot of reflection as well, and like, to apologise, and I think I'm pretty good at apologising when I know that I've done the wrong thing, and I don't think most people can do that. I'm not talking about not knowing you've done the right thing, like just thinking you're right. A lot of people don't think they're right. They know that they're wrong, but they just defend themselves at the expense of the other person's rightful recognition of being right. So that's one thing I have done. Anyway, so, and I have to say that doing that kind of work on yourself, like, I'm pretty good at apologising now. Doing that kind of work on yourself does not make life better, I can say. I'm not, and of course I don't, you know, you don't do that kind of self-improvement to make your own life better. Well, if you can, if you like, if you want to improve your relationships. But I just did it because I think it was wrong of me to be that way, and I wanted to change. But it just makes fucking life all the more agonising, because no one will fucking take responsibility. And when they apologise, it's always for something that needs no apology. And and then they don't apologise for the thing that does need an apology. And for example, for the main example, and this is what got me into this is what tapped me into the vein of like personality disorders and manipulation tactics. When I was researching the behaviour of a friend I had, oh God, I don't know, like 10 years ago-ish, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with her? Like, what was going on? Like, and then I found out it's like, she's got a personality disorder. And by that we mean sort of the cluster B sort of personality disorders, and I don't think it's really fair to put borderline personality disorder in there. I think it's quite different. But anything that just as another counsellor had said to me, and she was very like me in values, she just said personality disorders are best characterised as disorders of responsibility. And it's, I think that's quite accurate, at least of the cluster Bs, right? And so that's what she had. She had a disorder of responsibility. And we would frequently make plans to socialise. And in fact, she was the one who would initiate most of those plans to socialise. And then we socialised, according to our plans to go out or come to one another's house or something like that. We had contact in a different way. It was an overt situation, but when it came to actually enacting one of our social engagement plans, she would always, without fail, like we had zero social occasions together because she would always cancel at the last minute. And after a while, I called her out on it, and it was a big deal for me to do that because I wasn't assertive then. I had complained a lot to other people, but I wouldn't approach the person. And I said, I just said, like, this is not cool, like, you're the one who initiates these plans, for starters, and even if she didn't, it's still her responsibility to say yes or no to them. And you cancel at the last minute. She's like, it's not at the last minute, it's often, it's like, it's usually within a few hours in advance. And I'm like, oh my God, you think that a few hours in advance isn't the last minute? It's Friday night, buddy. Like, it deprives me of making other plans, and sometimes I turn down, cause it's when I had friends, it means that I turn down other plans, and it means that also that I'm geared up to go and do something and that I'm committed even if maybe I don't actually feel like it anymore. And she just said, look, I run a small business and it's really demanding, and I just don't have the time to go out. And you just don't, you just lack empathy. You just don't understand what it's like to run a small business. And I remember saying something like, I don't think you know what it means to run a small business, because you ought to know by now that you don't have the time to socialise. So what business do you have if I can making social advances on people when you know full well that you're going to cancel on them? Like, what are you doing? And so in that example, it shows that they're not that I think she apologised, but the reason that she but a reason in the place of where an apology could be, it's like the reason that she gave me for cancelling is false. You didn't cancel because you're too busy with your small business. You cancelled because you have no fucking respect for me or my time. And the way to solve the problem of not having time to socialise with other people and having to cancel social plans is to just not make the social plans to start with. You've either got the time or you don't. If you don't make the plan. Don't make the plan and then cancel at the last minute all of the time. And sometimes she'd complain to me about other people who had, pulled her up on it, and just showing this kind of moral high road, like, oh my God, I gave her 2 hours notice, or it's like, oh my God, so I Google, and it's like, oh my God, it's a personality disorder. And I'm really, really on the, my eyes have been open for such a long time to people who make excuses or give apologies, excuses that are disguised as apologies. And then you have a nice little guilt trip on top of it, just to, and it's like, if you have a person like me who is pretty gullible, very moral, very focused on doing the right thing, not that I do always do the right thing. God, of course I fucking don't. I make a lot of, moral mistakes, and I do a lot of immoral things on purpose because it benefits me. I'm human. But I'm aware of this, and this is what I'm trying to change. Like I'm and I constantly try to make things just play the game and on harder level. Like fucking suck it up and say sorry. It's hard, but you've got to do it, and like the fact that you've been arguing your point intensely for fucking days, doesn't mean that you. It's fucking much harder to fucking walk that back and say, fuck, I was wrong. I'm really sorry. At that point, you need to say, and I'm really sorry that I fucking pushed my point so hard when, I was being, clearly in the wrong, because that's really important as well. Because that's what you've done on top of being wrong, is being persistently and aggressively wrong. So that's something that you have to do as well. And it's just like, it does not feel good. And you kind of got to like, you got to do a bit of a Rocky montage before you can do it sometimes. I'm having to apologise to my fucking shit scum slumlord in Wellington. And, the fact that he's like a fucking piece of shit slumlord doesn't mean that I wasn't wrong in something I said to him. And it's not about getting revenge on someone. It's about me. It's like I've made a commitment to say the truth when it puts me in a bad light. It's like, it's my mistake. I have to correct it. So, I had a bit of a learning experience, and it was really good. It's really good because improving yourself to make yourself a better person and be more accountable to other people, you got to do that, and at the same time you've got to do that is you've got to end up being more assertive with other people as well. And quite often, and it kind of seems like shit that's kind of counter, kind of contradictory, but actually I really, really, really do think that they are very closely related. And I think doormats are often the bitchier kind of people. So one, I'm not going to treat anyone else like a doormat. Well, I've never treated anyone like a doormat. Well, I probably have, but that's not my that's not my adult style. but I'm not gonna tolerate in myself anymore, being abusive. And I'm also not going to tolerate any people making excuses when they need to own up. And so that's something that you would do together. So really interesting. And so it sort of came to fruition today in a really interesting way. So as anyone who watches my ramblings knows, I've tried for a very long time a whole gazillions and gazillions of support agencies and people and all that kind of stuff, and in almost all cases it's come to nothing, and quite often I've come off worse from even trying. And there are some really good people in my life, but they're either pretty much out of reach, or I without blaming those really good people, I have nobody. I really have nobody. The closest thing I have to somebody is my GP, and she's incredible, but there's only so much that she can do, and she's really the person holding me together at the moment. And what I really need, it's just I'm not even that picky about what it is. I just need someone to help me in some area of my life. So just take something off me, And one thing, I really, as I keep saying, I really need some love in TLC. And I thought, I'll have another crack at finding a counsellor, because, I often don't have anyone to share my hardships with, which is why I talk to my camera. So I had another guy, and I still don't know how to find a trauma-informed therapist, really. And it's a minefield, because you get the wrong therapist and they can fuck you up really badly, and not on purpose, just because they don't understand. They to go back to that, I was talking last night about, you just cannot move. It's like you treat a traumatized person like you treat someone who's fallen from a great height. You do not see the internal damage. And one wrong maneuver, and there's something seriously punctured, or nerves severed, or something. And so a lot of counselling is about challenging beliefs. And there's one thing that you do not do to an abuse victim who's traumatised, or even just a traumatised person who imagines that she's been abused, is you don't challenge her perceptions. That's not the right tool. You've got to tread very carefully, because you are really in a position of enormous power to really fuck that person up permanently. And so, and the recommendation is the recommendation from experts about trauma is you've really got to interview the counsellors, and you've got to ask them all about what their trauma therapy style is, because they're not,